Why does everyone hate Kirk Herbstreit? What did this guy do to anyone?
It's weird that people have latched onto him when so many people are more culpable in what happened to Florida State.
Let's just leave Kirk Herbstreit alone. Let's start the show.
FanBuzz Weekly starts now.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to FanBuzz Weekly. I am Tyler, joined alongside Will. Patrick is out today. Feel better, Patrick. We missed you. You're missing the biggest show of the year, man. It's the College Football Playoff. Cannot wait to break it down with Will, two of the most exciting matchups of the year. But before we talk about the best teams in college football, I think it's only right that we talk about probably the worst team in college football and just give a shout out to the Kent State Golden Flashes, which is just an iconic name. 1-11, 0-8 in the MAC. And surprisingly enough, actually not surprising at all, Will watched a lot of Kent State football. Will, you are just disgusting for doing this, but why have you watched so much Kent State football this year?
Well, my girlfriend was a Golden Flash, and they've been a fun team in recent seasons with Sean Lewis, who went off to Colorado, and now he's the head coach in San Diego State. The dude is phenomenal. Got them to 3 straight winning seasons and their first ever bowl victory, but they had an okay year last year by their standards. This year, the wheels fell off. Sean left. Every starter on both sides of the football and every assistant coach also left the program. This is basically starting a college football team from scratch. So everything went wrong. They had almost no good performances. They almost got the beautiful thing about college football is that you can gain a positive by boiling your year down to one Saturday or a weekday if you're a MAC team. Your rivalry game, Kent was up 27-10 on Akron in the fourth quarter and managed to blow that entirely and lose in regulation. The wagon wheel. It's a fun rivalry. One of the oldest. I've actually attended it. It's a really fun game, but yeah, Kent really messed up that one. It would have been their only FBS win of the year, and they didn't get it. So yeah, worst team in the country. There's always next year flashes. Please come back, Sean.
I'd much rather give a shout out to the MAC schools I actually did watch that I really enjoyed, which are Toledo and Miami of Ohio, because just 2 phenomenal years. I mean, Toledo might have like a day 2 potential round 1 cornerback in Quinion Mitchell if he goes pro. Miami of Ohio is getting a ton of players coming back, not entering the transfer portal. That is going to be a cohesive unit again next year, which is going to be really fun. So, I mean, shout out to both those programs for some phenomenal seasons. Miami, Ohio, I believe, is already on the road to their bowl game as well. Yeah. So
Miami has an interesting bowl, and Miami has had some crazy accolades. I mean, Graham Nicholson, an amazing kicker. He set an NCAA or an FBS record with 25 kicks in a row made. First MAC player to win the Lou Groza. Nice. And Coach Bronowski, their special teams coordinator.
I've met him. He is.
Have you?
I love that guy. He is.
Do you know the numbers? Do you know the numbers that he had this year?
I do not know.
Well, there's obviously Nicholson. They were the number 1 team in net punting, number 2 in blocked kicks and punts, and top 15 in punt returns. That guy deserves a Power 5 job, like yesterday.
So I did a coaching clinic at Miami this year, and I got to meet him and sat in on a special teams meeting. And the energy in those special teams meetings, like, is unlike anything I've ever experienced. Like, I was ready to run through a brick wall just talking about kickoff coverage and return coverage. Like, it was unbelievable.
Hey, don't sleep on kickoff coverage. It's the most for a player who played all 3 phases. Kickoff is the most fun snap of the game. You get to fly down the field, and there's tons of energy. So good for Coach Bronowski. What a year!
Yeah, honestly, phenomenal year. Shout out to that program. I mean, again, thank you for the hospitality, but yeah, just learned so much in just that one day. But that's enough MAC talk for a college football playoff preview episode. I love the MAC, but obviously we got to talk about 2 of the biggest games of the year. Phenomenal matchups. We're not going to talk about Florida State. We're not going to talk about committee decisions, but just objectively looking at these 2 games, these are incredibly fun matchups. So why don't we just go ahead and start with the Sugar Bowl, Washington versus Texas. 2 very unique paths into getting into the college football playoff. Washington is now the lone Pac-12 team playing the last Pac-12 games possibly ever against Steve Sarkisian, Quinn Ewers, just a loaded Texas team on both sides of the ball. We can talk a bit about this matchup, but why don't we just start with the quarterbacks, Quinn Ewers and Michael Penix. Who needs this win more for their legacy as a college football player, Will?
I mean, just by default, it's got to be Penix. He's done. This is it. Quinn could come back, win a national championship next season. We talked about teams with quarterback stability. There's only 3 coming into next year. They'll all be in the SEC. It's Texas, Alabama, and Georgia, but 12-team playoff, you don't need to win the SEC to get in. Quinn has an opportunity to make himself. I mean, if he wins both, he becomes a hyper legend, but he doesn't need this as much as Penix. I mean, what this would mean to the Washington program would be absolutely tremendous. So I think that it would be kind of a bigger deal for Penix. And also it would cap off an undefeated season, which is always special.
Yeah, it really, all the buzz seems to be that Ewers is coming back. So I can see where just legacy wise, the fact that he made it into the playoff back when we're talking about this in the future, when it was only 4 teams in and of itself is an achievement. Where for Penix, he's just kind of championing the last Pac-12 team ever. So there's just a lot riding for him to, have the Pac-12 end on a high note, which I find super interesting. And then another quarterback talk, Malik Murphy will not be the backup. He is transferring. He will not be traveling with the team. I appreciated his comments about it. And he's just like, I really didn't want this to be the case, but this is just how I have to go about doing this in order to, find the right program and fit. But you know what that means the backup is now at Texas? Arch Manning, true freshman. If something happens to Quinn, we are seeing a Manning in the college football playoff.
Man, I mean, if Quinn gets hurt but Texas wins, can they get replaced because they're just not the same team anymore without their starting quarterback?
Oh.
I don't know. Can someone get the Bulldogs on the phone? Tyler says yes, but
yes.
I mean, this would be like
switch them out.
If he comes in against Michigan or Alabama after if Texas beats Washington, that would be like the best college football story since the Tua halftime substitution, which I'm sure Tyler doesn't want to dwell on, but I consider the greatest national championship of the recent era. But I think there's even more compelling narratives to this than just the quarterbacks. I think it's gotten so easy to forget because of everything that's gone on with him and with the program since then, separately. But Steve Sarkisian was a Washington Husky head coach. He inherited a team that had gone 0-12, and he got them up to, perennial bowl contention, winning, made the Alamo Bowl, had a 9-win season. This is a pretty interesting kind of, I don't want to call it a revenge game, but it's kind of a revenge game for Sark. I think this is it's a pretty big spot. Also, as far as Washington carrying the banner for the Pac-12, here's a fun fact. They're the only undefeated champion in the Pac-12 era, ever.
Are they really?
That's
Pac-12,
why we haven't,
instead of Pac-10, yeah, okay.
Yeah, we haven't seen them in the playoff or the conference in the playoff since UW back in 2015 because no one can go undefeated. That UW team was 12-1, so it's kind of a weird way to end the conference. It's almost unfitting, but I'm enjoying it.
That was the Jake Browning team, right?
That was the Jake Browning team, and now that guy's lighting it up in the NFL.
It was only a matter of time. If you ever want to have some fun, just go look at Jake Browning's high school stats. I think he had like 90 passing touchdowns in a season. Just some absurd number. We could talk quarterbacks all day and the narratives there, the coaches. I really want to talk about the wide receivers in this game. I mean, there may not be a single college football playoff game that's ever been played in the modern CFP era that has this kind of like talent and firepower at wide receiver. On the Washington side, you have Rome Odunze, who, in my opinion, is the second best wide receiver in this draft class behind Marvin Harrison Jr. You've got Jalen Polk, you've got Jalen McMillan, and then on the other side, you have just absolute speed in Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy. And then, Jatavian Sanders is a pretty dang good tight end. Like, the weapons in this are outrageous, and I cannot wait to see the firepower, and I'm hoping for a real shootout because of these weapons. Will, do you foresee a shootout with how much talent we have on these offenses?
Oh man, I definitely see a shootout. But now you have me down a rabbit hole of the best wide receiver games in the playoff era. I'm thinking Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave versus T. Higgins and Justin Ross, but this is a crazy one. In terms of shootouts, yeah, I don't see stops happening, but it's not all about the wideouts. I don't really see Washington as able to slow down the Texas run game. I think that's going to be a serious issue for them in staying ahead of the chains. But on the other side of the football, yeah, it's going to be a wide receiver bonanza. You're going to have a field day as a big wideouts guy. I don't see how Texas's secondary hangs with Washington. The big win for them, obviously, is the one over Alabama. And while this is a great Bama team, we'll talk about in a moment, this is not the team where Devonta Smith was like wideout number 3. This is not a wideout heavy team. This was not the most a contender could press a team's secondary, which again we'll get to in a moment. But that's the best team Texas has played, and it hasn't been able to exploit Texas's back end, and I think Washington can. Not that it's a problem for Texas, their back end, but it's not up to par. Like you said, there's like 3 NFL players in that receiving core for Washington, and I think Penix is going to have an absolute field day. This is going to be so much fun.
Now here's where Texas has the edge, especially with trying to contain Penix, and it's that defensive line. I mean, Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat are just 2 mammoth human beings that can, produce against the run and rush the passer. And, Washington has some players on that offensive line, but we've seen like when Penix is rattled, like he's not nearly as productive. It can kind of stall the offense. The Washington offense has had these weird spurts throughout the year. They found ways to win, obviously, but they just kind of go quiet. And with that kind of beef up front, I can see it being a real disruptive force for Texas's defense. And if I'm thinking of how does Texas pull off this win, I imagine those two guys have to play a factor.
Yeah, the Texas front is, it's why I'm so concerned about Washington's ability to run the football. And man, I stay up at night in fear of Texas pulling Walter Nolan in the transfer portal because we play them next year for basically no reason. But I do think that Washington's going to have to get the ball out a little bit quicker than they normally like to. They love to be vertical and get downfield, but I don't know. I think that they're going to be able to adapt. Kalen DeBoer's a phenomenal coach. Obviously, Penix will be able to do whatever's asked of him as a passer. I think he's way more consistent than Quinn. Quinn can hit any throw, but I don't think he does it every single time. He's a deep ball completion rate of 32.5% this season. He hasn't really been making turnover-worthy plays, but I think in a shootout like this one, you don't need a big turnover to swing the result like you saw in like Michigan, Ohio State. You just need a drive to stall out because you failed on third and medium, and boom, all of a sudden the momentum has shifted to the other side. I think the margins are going to be that narrow, and I think it's all going to be about who can get 1, 2, 3 stops, not who can stop the other team completely.
We can move on to the Rose Bowl in a second, but first, any other matchups you want to talk about? And then if not, or if so, afterwards, give me your prediction.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't really have any other matchups until I'm going to save something for Take the Over because I have a couple that I'm very excited about. But I think that my pick in this game, it's a razor thin margin. I think my betting pick is definitely Washington as an underdog as far as the spread, but my outcome, I'm taking Washington outright too. It's a little less confident because you're obviously not getting points that way, but I just don't see how Texas. You're right that the route would be pressuring Penix, but I don't know that they're going to be able to accomplish that. I think the receivers from Washington are going to have too easy of a job finding separation, whereas Washington can't clamp Texas, but I think Quinn will give it to them a couple times, not in terms of picks, but just he's not going to be consistent enough to score every drive. Like I think you'll need to.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking here. In a game of this caliber, it's going to come down to which team makes fewer mistakes. And when I think about the paths of these two teams, I can just envision Washington making fewer mistakes in a potential shootout where Quinn may struggle. That's just what I see here. I think Washington, and we've talked about it all year, I have to root for Washington, but they've got DeBoer and Penix, and it wouldn't be a FanBuzz Weekly episode if I didn't mention that those guys were IU grads. So I'm very much rooting for the Huskies there.
Yeah, I think they've got this one. They've become somehow underrated, even as the number 2 team in the country. They were big underdogs against Oregon, who they had already beaten. I've talked about how good that Oregon team is, but I thought 9.5 points was a joke. I think that there's something to be said for being able to turn it on at the right moments. We've seen it from Alabama. We thought we were seeing it from Georgia until the very end. We definitely have seen it from Michigan and OSU. I think Washington got caught sleepwalking a little bit, and luckily they were able to navigate it to the point where they're still undefeated. I don't think there's real concerns about this offense. The only thing you can say is, will they get even one stop against Texas? I think so, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, I agree. And just a big moment for a lot of guys. I cannot wait for that one. And just totally random, but the color matchup of burnt orange versus purple is so interesting. I don't think we've seen something like that in a playoff yet. So
someone's got to be coming out in their white jerseys. I don't know who's I guess UW's the official home team, so maybe we'll have burnt orange and white jerseys with the rich purple jerseys from Washington.
Give me both home
color
jerseys. Get a little color rush CFP action. But let's go ahead and move on to the Rose Bowl. I think Will has been on the edge of his seat wanting to talk about this one as the Michigan guy here. But obviously, if we're talking about just stylistically, completely different kind of game we're going to see in the Rose Bowl versus the Sugar Bowl here between Alabama and Michigan. Never met before in a Rose Bowl game. Not a surprise there. Michigan, despite having such an easy ride to get into the playoff, they are 0-2 in the college football playoff era. They're going against a red hot Jalen Milroe. Why don't we just start like we did last time and talk about those quarterbacks first? Jalen Milroe and McCarthy, two very different players stylistically. One's riding a hot hand. What are you expecting to see from these two guys in this game?
Well, first of all, I'd like to take slight exception to such an easy path. We have 2 top 10 wins, and we also played 3 of the 4 best defenses in the country, with the 4th being us. But as far as the quarterbacks, I think that might be one of Michigan's. I think it might be one of our bigger edges in this game. I as far as we think Milroe has come, I think he's going to have tremendous issues with Michigan's front seven. He hasn't seen anything like it. I know Georgia's got a lot of talent, but this is not the 2021 Georgia team, which was literally an NFL defense and a good one. It's the Eagles defense. But I think that getting pressure on Milroe is going to cause some inconsistency in the deep balls that he relies on so heavily. It's going to exacerbate his issues with short, accurate passing. Whereas JJ's been under heat constantly. He hasn't always been prolific, but you didn't see him turn it over against Penn State or Ohio State. We could talk about that one controversial touchdown interception, but it wasn't a turnover type throw. It was actually probably the best throw I've ever seen him make. I think it's going to be a big boost for us that JJ's been in this type of situation over and over. It's his second playoff. We've never had the experience edge when we've gotten into the playoff. I guess the TCU game, but we were facing a very veteran team, even if they hadn't been in the playoff before. I think that JJ's he's poised to break out a little bit. We're not going to be able to run the football like we like to against this Alabama team, but our receiving weapons are a little underrated. Colson Loveland's one of the best tight ends in the country. Roman Wilson, great. Yeah.
Your tight ends are ridiculous. Loveland and Barner. Again, IU transfer, but the tight ends in this really, I think, dictate a lot of what they can do. McCarthy loves to attack the middle of the field as well, I've noticed. And those two, just as an aside, just have had really strong years.
Barner would be the top tight end for probably 120 to 125 of the FBS teams in the country. But Loveland's a pro tomorrow if he wants it. And Roman Wilson's obviously gotten a lot of love for his touchdown scoring, but Cornelius Johnson was our leading receiver last year on a team that went undefeated. And he's just silently flown under the radar because of the volume our overall passing offense has had. I think it's going to be a really interesting battle in that regard. But I'm interested to see what you have to say on the quarterbacks because I know we've talked about Milroe quite a bit this season.
Yeah, I'm very glad that Milroe announced today as we're recording that he is returning to school for a senior season. I think that's just massive for his development. It's huge for the program as well. I mean, they found this guy. They don't have to worry about replacing him because at Alabama, the quarterback situation is always really weird. So the fact that he is staying is going to be huge. I imagine recruiting-wise, that's going to help a lot for weapons as well. I'm just very excited for that component of it. But the way I see these, I mean, I see Milroe as this just absolute wild card where, yes, he's going to make some mistakes. He's going to have some inaccurate throws. But the explosiveness of this guy, whether it is throwing it deep to weapons like Burton and Isaiah Bond, or just simply taking off with his legs, that dual threat factor plays such an impact on defenses. I mean, Georgia was playing double QB spy in the SEC championship. Just basically, if he's going this way, we have a spy over here, and he's going the other direction, we have a spy over there. It was a very fascinating defensive scheme to try and contain him. And I'm curious to see if Michigan does something similar. But McCarthy, go ahead, Paul.
I think it's going to be different. I think or at least how I would handle it if I were the defensive coordinator, which I'm not. But I think that one of the best thing about this team, seriously, on either side of the ball, it used to be our O-line and the running game. It's actually not, especially with Zinter, our best player on offense, hurt. I think it's our secondary. I think what we can do is completely eliminate a downfield passing game for Alabama, like completely. And really beg Milroe to beat us with his legs. I think he's going to have a really good rushing game. I don't know that we have the linebacker, although one of our only all Big Ten players was a linebacker, and it wasn't even Junior Colson. But I digress. I don't know that we have the athletes in that part of the field to slow down Milroe as a runner. I think we just have to say it's 2023. If you can beat us solely by running your quarterback, go ahead and do it. I don't think that there's much hope for Alabama's receiving staff, which I said we'd get back to. They have guys. I mean, as Bond's a great player, but they don't have this Devonta Smith and Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs type of receiving core anymore. And we've got Will Johnson, who I think is the best corner in the country, if not Cooper DeJean. I think Will's second at worst. You've got Mike Sanders still, who is everywhere. Every game, he's absolutely clamps. He leads the team in picks. And then you've got Rod Moore, who's gaining a lot of steam as an NFL safety. I don't think Alabama's going to have a downfield passing game. If they can beat us just running the football, great. I'll enjoy an old-fashioned football game, even if we don't come out on top.
Yeah, I know Bond's made a lot of the highlight plays, but I'm very curious to see how Jermaine Burton can handle that kind of secondary. Because one of the things I've noticed all year whenever I watch Burton, and granted, I haven't sat down and just like watched tape on the guy, but he's very decisive with his releases and his routes. And I think that's where he creates separation. But against like a lockdown corner like Will Johnson, like you were talking about, I'm very interested to see that matchup. That might be one of the more quiet matchups that I'll be keeping an eye on in that game because I think that'll be a heck of a lot of fun. But back to Michigan's offense with McCarthy, I just love the way he attacks the middle of the field. He has enough athleticism. And then obviously you just have Blake Corum, who just what a year that kid's having as far as touchdown production. And is obviously the heart and soul of that offense. Tough runner. I don't know how many times his nose wound has opened up since that happened. But I mean, I swear that guy's bloodied after every single game. That running game against just obviously they're going to have to run the dang ball with just how dynamic of an edge rusher Alabama has. They have some heck of good corners. Do you think that running attack can help you guys stay balanced on offense to handle Alabama?
I am pretty terrified about the whole Zinter injury. I've been saying all year he's our best offensive player, bar none, including Blake. He is one of our All-Americans, team captain. Losing him was one of the most crushing moments I've had as a Michigan fan, which is saying something because we've had some moments. But I think that Drake Nugent is going to have to be the team MVP in this game. He's been phenomenal. And by the way, has anyone ever done college football better than Drake Nugent? He has a Stanford bachelor's. He'll have a Michigan master's in a couple months, and he's going to go to the NFL as like a second rounder or a day 2 pick. Man, that kid's got it made. But Drake's had a phenomenal year for us at center, anchors the O-line, and he's going to have to be a mentor of sorts to whoever it is stepping in at right guard for Zach. So I think we can run the football, but I think we just have to do it enough that we can open up the field for the air game. This has to be an air first game. And if there is going to be running, I think J.J. has to be a part of it, whether that's on design runs or scramble. He has to make Alabama defend the whole field, because if they're focused between the hashes, we'll lose.
I think one of the biggest factors in this entire game is just simply the time that's leading up to it. It's one of the biggest things a coach can ask for is the amount of time you get to prepare for a single game. And I know this is just coach talk right now, but I imagine there's going to be a lot of tendency breakers in this game from both sides, to keep guys on their toes. These offenses are going to come out with some trickery, I think, and then just some plays that you're not going to see coming. I just think that's when you have this much time to prepare, you can get really creative with stuff, especially on offense. And that's just kind of what I see. I think there's going to be a couple plays that no one's expecting that are going to be huge momentum swings. I'm just honestly not sure what side it is. I think this is going to be a much closer game than the other one. And so I think we can just get into predictions now. I think I'm taking Alabama, and I know it's going to break Will's heart, but there's just too much firepower on both sides of that ball. I know Jalen Milroe can definitely be susceptible to making some mistakes, but I think that offense or that defense for Alabama is going to generate some game-changing turnovers. I think all Alabama needs is a couple of huge plays that are, maybe broken or trickeration that are going to open this up. I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to come down to potentially a game-winning touchdown or field goal, but I think I'm taking Alabama.
I think this is the hardest game to pick of the entire season.
Yeah.
And it's because of what you said. I think if this happened the week after conference championships, I would hardly have a fear in the world. But Nick Saban with a month to prep is absolutely terrifying. In terms of trick plays, Jim is a bigger trick play guy, and I think we're going to have a cool one. But Jim sometimes overthinks, like lining up and running a linebacker on 4th and 1 on the goal line last year against TCU. We just have to line the damn ball up and run it. We have the best short yardage runner since Derrick Henry in college football, and we're just not a very different type of player, but the most effective one since then. And we're just not using him in those spots, or last year at least. And I'm afraid that, everything's been very straightforward this year, but I'm afraid that Jim thinks too much after, especially having had 3 weeks off, not coaching. I don't know if he'll be in his head too much, but Saban with that much time to prep is terrifying. But Michigan is the best team in the country. We have been all season. I'm one of the very few writers I've seen who does a weekly power ranking and has had the same team every single week from preseason to playoff at number 1. I just think even if you're the best team, losing your single best offensive player is a real problem. And I know that this isn't like, it's not the flashiest thing. It's not what most casual fans are going to think of, but yeah, an offensive guard is the best team in the country's best offensive player. He's that good, and he's that important to the way we run offense, our offensive blocking schemes. Thankfully, we have the best offensive line coach in the country, Sharon Moore, who's borderline a head coach at this point. So I believe in him to draw up some stuff, but I think, oh man, I really did not come into this with an official pick. I thought we'd flesh it out and I'd finally come to a conclusion, but I don't know. I think I have to trust the talent. I have to take Michigan. This is a tough one, but I believe in our team, and this has to be the year we get it done. It has to be.
Regardless of who you're picking, just shout out to Nick Saban for even getting to this point. Like, if you ever had any questions about who the best coach in college football is, from where this Alabama team came to where they are now, is just an absolutely incredible turnaround.
Oh, the fact that we're even talking about this is all about, I love Coach Jim and the stuff he's done. I was wrong on him initially. I thought he needed to go. I think he's one of the best coaches in the country, but there's such a divide. And there's the been there before type of aspect to it. Alabama's only lost one semifinal, and it was the first one ever. And Saban learned how to use that month, and he hasn't lost a semifinal since. Jim, meanwhile, we haven't been able to break that ceiling. I think the Jim Saban thing, it's the only reason this is, like, if we just looked at the guys, the players on paper, I think this would just be a Michigan, not a rout, but I think we'd be talking Michigan much more confidently. So this is all about Nick Saban and what he's been able to do in Tuscaloosa this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're wrong about the best team in college football. I think it's Georgia, but that's just a biased take. If they're fully healthy,
the committee chose the 4 best teams, so we know that it can't be Georgia.
If they were fully healthy, man, if Lad McConkey and Brock Bowers don't get hurt that season, I just think they run away with that game, especially with how much Carson Beck ascended. But they're not in the playoffs, so we don't have to talk about them. Let's go ahead and take the over. I know Will has a few bets, but I'm just going to jump in and cut him off real quick so he doesn't steal mine like he usually does. I'm going to take the Peach Bowl just because I think Ole Miss can score that over-under total on its own. I'm really excited about I love watching Lane Kiffin's offense. Just love that vertical passing game. Maybe we'll see a clipboard thrown in the air on a busted coverage that leads to like an 80-yard touchdown. Just a Lane Kiffin staple. I'm imagining you also picked the Peach Bowl, Will.
Yeah, I had the Peach Bowl. I mean, the number's sitting only at 49.5. I don't know if you had said that. The biggest opt-out on either side by a mile is Chop Robinson. He single-handedly kept Penn State in the game against Michigan. He forced us to completely abandon the pass and do 7 linemen every single play. He's a tremendous talent. I'm interested to see how he does in the NFL, but we'll talk draft later, I'm sure, in a different episode.
Yep.
He is going to, the absence of, he's not the only player on the defense. It's a great defense, but him not being there manifestly changes the way they play defense and the way Ole Miss, which is one of the best balanced offenses in the country between running with Judkins, throwing it with Dart. I don't know if we'll see more opt-outs, but at this moment, yeah, that offense is going to be able to fly. And Penn State has some dudes too. I'm very interested to see how that one turns out. But for my official pick, since Tyler did snipe that one, that was the one that I had there. Yeah. I'm going to circle back to the Sugar Bowl. The number is bigger. It's 63.5 last I checked. But we talked about this. I think it comes down to just a handful of stops. Washington is not going to be able to run, which is actually going to help the over. Kalen is brilliant. And he's not going to have to get in there and fail to figure out that he can't run in this game. He is going in throwing, and the pace is going to, and first of all, it's going to work. They're going to score a lot of points going through the air, and this game's going to move fast. There's going to be a lot of pace, a lot of possessions, a lot of points. I think one of the 2 teams will get into the 40s. The other will get into the 30s and make this a comfortable hit.
Well, Will did some digging, looked back on some of our bets from previous weeks. Sounds like we've actually done okay. Which I've been pretty happy to hear. I know Patrick just had lost all confidence after some of his Iowa picks, but just glad to see that some of the betting has done well. Yeah,
I could not believe that the one Patrick finally hit was Patriots Steelers on Thursday Night Football, the Bailey Zappi legacy game. I'm a Patriots fan. I'm sure we'll talk about them as we get towards the NFL after college, but that game completely took me by surprise. So great call, Patrick. Impressed by you on that one. I hope you feel better soon.
Since it is, the episode before the college football playoff, did you see this? Why don't we just take a look at some of our favorite moments from 2023? And I want you to start, Will. I'm sure you have a lot. I can imagine one that you might want to bring up. And if you don't, I'll make sure I share it as well.
Man, I'm really curious about what it might be, but I have 2, and I've talked about them on the show before, but these ones just stand out so starkly to me amongst the rest of the season. One is the Kyle Monangai fumble Ruski against Ohio State. It was like the first 40-yard play the Bucs gave up all year. Gave Rutgers a fighting chance, which they, immediately squandered, but that team's got a lot of heart. Greg Schiano just got another extension. Monangai is coming back. The Big Ten leading rusher, which no one's talking about, Kyle Monangai. Essex County kid playing in Yankee Stadium with Rutgers for their bowl. I think there's going to be high motivation to beat Miami. And the other one is I mentioned this play already in this episode, but the play after Zach Zitter broke his leg.
Yep.
That's the one? Yeah.
That was the one. Yep.
I thought it was all over. If we didn't prove to ourselves immediately that we could still run the football, we were going to lose. It was a tie game at that point. And then Blake Corum doesn't find a hole, bounces it back, finds the 20-plus yard score, pounding his chest, throwing the 6-5 up in the camera. That's the moment of the year for Michigan. And if we win the national championship, knock on wood, that's an all-time Michigan moment that might never be topped.
I think it still is an all-time Michigan moment. I mean, that was the one I was going to bring up. I don't even care. I don't care about that rivalry, really. I'm an IU guy. No one asked for my opinion when talking about Michigan or Ohio State. That moment gave me absolute chills, though. Like, it was just a very special moment in college football. So I'm glad you brought it up. I'm not surprised you brought it up. I could talk about so many. I mean, there so many moments from like the Washington-Oregon game stick out, especially earlier in the year. It was just some fun games. I could think about just Brock Bowers dominating, getting into that Heisman conversation earlier this season. But the one I want to bring up, and I just absolutely loved it because it ended up being such an iconic moment for a program that doesn't get a lot of love usually. Harrison Mevis, the thicker kicker for Missouri, hit a 61-yard game winner earlier this season back in September. It's an SEC all-time record. Helped the Missouri storm the field in an upset win. Who was that over? Oh my gosh.
Kansas State the top of my head, but I don't remember.
Yeah, it was Kansas State.
I thought when you brought up the thicker kicker, I thought you were going to talk about him chomping against Florida because Patrick's not here to defend himself right now. But he's had a season.
That moment was kind of one of those. At first, you thought, oh, that's kind of cute. Good win for Missouri. They ended up having a phenomenal year. And just even they competed against Georgia. And I had a lot of respect for how Missouri played this year. Like, all the respect in the world. Phenomenal year. They absolutely deserve just the accolades that they got. And just having a thicker kicker drill some clutch field goals this year is always fun. I always really, really enjoy that. Another program that deserves a shout out in that similar vein is just Louisville. I know they lost in the ACC championship to Florida State, but Brian Brom, former Purdue guy. I know I'm not supposed to like him, but everything I've ever heard about the guy is that he's just a phenomenal head coach. And to turn that Louisville program around again so quickly is just really impressive. Very excited for them. Any other moments you want to share, Will, or should we go ahead and wrap it up?
I mean, there's literally too many to count. I could talk about.
What a year. What a phenomenal
everything that happened in the MAC, the final year of the Pac-12. Oh man, it was a blast of a season, but I think those are the two biggest ones for me. It's let's go Knights, win the Pinstripe Bowl, and go Blue. we've got two more wins.
What a phenomenal college football season, and what feels like truly the last of an era, with expansion coming, Pac-12 ending, transfer portal in craziness coming this offseason. We cannot appreciate or thank you guys enough for listening the whole season. We will obviously still be back with the national championship episode following the holidays. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year to everyone. AJ, thank you so much in the background. Always doing a great work with production. Thank you, Will. Patrick, we hope you feel better soon. Before we go, make sure that you do subscribe to our newsletter. Get all the great content written for myself, Patrick, Will, all of our phenomenal staff of writers. You can see that in the episode description wherever you're listening. Make sure you subscribe, leave us a review, especially since it's the holiday season. If you're in the giving spirit, just help us out. It really helps out with improving our reach on all these platforms. But we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening. Take care, and I guess go Blue, but not really go Dogs. How's that? Take care, guys. Right. Do you think Florida State should boycott the Orange Bowl and just not show up?
Personally, I think Florida State has almost nothing to lose and everything to gain.
They probably should, because they're going to get killed by Georgia.